Here's one of the latest interviews from Rock and Metal Revival. If you want to hear the whole show, go to rmrshow.com.
There's some classic Megadeth, Symphony of Destruction on Rock and Metal Revival. And Jerry, that song always brings back good memories for me back in the day. Megadeth, what a notorious band.
Oh, definitely. And
on the phone with us, we are proud to have one of the members of Megadeth, Mr. Dave Ellefson. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Fantastic, and we are excited about the new Megadeth album, but we're really, Jerry and I have, our conversation has been surrounded around your new book, My Life with Deth.
Yes, it just came out last week, and as the title would indicate, it's a life story, it's an autobiography, but also one that certainly is a Megadeth story as well, and it's also a journey of me just as a young kid who fell in love with rock and roll and the bass guitar and the journeys I've had in my life, which have been pretty outstanding for a kid who just wanted to play the bass. I've gotten to do a lot of pretty cool, fun stuff in my life.
That's for sure. I actually got to read the book. I got it before Red did. And there was so many parallels between your life and mine when I was a kid, because I grew up with the Lutheran and all that stuff and got into music and playing bass and everything about the same time you did. And except I didn't go to L.A. and get famous like you did.
Yeah, well, back in it's funny, most of us, as you indicated, there's a faith journey in there as well. Being a kid who grew up on the farm in the Midwest with a work ethic and Lutheran church on Sunday. Fortunately, the Protestant and Catholic kind of Judeo-Christian that kind of upbringing that probably a lot of us in the Midwest had. It wasn't very fanatical. It wasn't like a bunch of witch burners and all this kind of stuff. And in recent years, there's been more of kind of a kind of non-denominational church, sort of reborn Christianity revival thing. And so lots of times if people ask me, when did you become a Christian? And it's like, well, that's, my faith has kind of just been part of my fabric ever since I was a kid. I think I was baptized at a month old, so before I remember it, it's always just been part of my life. So I don't separate rock and roll and faith. And I think that comes as a bit of a shock to some people, because I think, a lot of people in sort of the faith and the religious communities, especially the more conservative factions, look at us rock and rollers like we're some sort of like satanic hippies or something. And as you know, because you're into rock and roll like I am, and we're not. It's the two of them have always kind of walked concurrently side by side in our lives.
Dave, another probably misconception is just the type and genre of music that we all love. Sometimes sheds a bad light that people just don't understand.
Well, I got into, rock and roll is kind of, Styx, Foreigner, Kansas, BTO, Kiss, that kind of stuff, stuff from like the kind of mid and late 70s. But, when it was my turn up to bat, the thing that kind of really inspired me was the Black Sabbath records like Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, the early Iron Maiden records, those kind of things. And, part of what the fascination was with that is there was a bit of a pushback from rock and roll against some of the religious community. I remember I talked about this in the book, there was a religious organization out in Minneapolis that were like out literally burning. They would have public record burning parties, or they would burn all the rock and roll records. And it's like, boy, talk about a way to not endear yourself to the very people you're trying to reach.
Exactly.
And, so there was a pushback from rock and roll. I remember when the Iron Maiden record, came out, The Number of the Beast. I mean, boy, if that wasn't a pushback against a lot of religious things. And I don't know what Iron Maiden's intention with it was, but for me as a fan listening to it, it kind of became part of the soundtrack to my life. And I didn't, I wasn't, a kid who rebelled against school and rebelled against church and my parents, those kind of things. Probably more than any normal teenager, just kind of tried to spread your wings and fly, and kind of be your own man. But rock and roll and a lot of our genre, the early 80s and stuff like that, and thrash metal, we wrote about a lot of these kind of things, even occult themes and things like that, mostly because we were intrigued and they scared us. It wasn't so much that we were into it. It was kind of like, we were young men and we were growing up and these things, rather than just singing about sex, drugs, and rock and roll and, and girls and beer parties, we wrote about other things, and that was just part of our growing up.
Yeah, it seems like those kind of lyrics go a lot better than like singing about the Wizard of Oz or something to some Megadeth music, you know?
Well, Megadeth for sure stood. We definitely had our own sound and our own lyrical style. Just this morning, I was thinking about the song "Set the World Afire," which was the very first Megadeth song ever written. In fact, it was originally titled Megadeth, and it didn't get recorded until our third record. So far, so good, so what? But it was about nuclear holocaust. And in the early 80s, you know, the nuclear race was on, the Cold War was on, and there was, you know, Megadeth, we looked out at a more global perspective, whereas a lot of our contemporaries, especially in L.A. where the band formed, you know, they were singing about, you know, chicks and making out and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, those are, you know, kind of standard fare for rock and roll lyrics. And we really wanted to do something more than that. And I think probably it's the reason Megadeth has stood the test of time now for 30 years, and you know, when I listen back to those early records today, you know, the lyrics hold up. It's funny how timeless they are, because the things we were writing about back then are actually still kind of going on today.
Exactly.
And, you know, I think when you write about people, you're always going to be writing about something that's timeless.
Exactly. You know, Dave, one of the things that I've always loved about Megadeth was the social consciousness of the band and its lyrics. I mean, a song like Peace Sells holds as much ground today as it did when you guys released it back in the day.
Absolutely. It's in fact, I remember when Dave and I and our agents were sitting across the street at Wiley's Barbecue in New York City. We were literally directly across the street from the UN building. And that was where the concept for the Peace Sells album cover was born, right there over a plate of ribs in New York. And the album was done, the music was done, and we were just conceptualizing the cover. And then we brought in the artist Ed Repka to finish the logo and do that artwork. And you know, it always has been this. You know, a lot of Megadeth lyrics, to some degree, are kind of born from people watching. You know, if you sit at a sidewalk cafe or you sit at a restaurant and you look out the window and you just kind of observe people and watch what they do. You know, we kind of, as a species, we sort of do the same thing over and over again. And you know, some say that, you know, if you don't know history, you're bound to repeat it. But sometimes it's almost in spite of our history, we're bound to repeat it.
You know, with a lot of great bands, there's always a collaboration. Now, tell us a little bit about your collaboration with Dave over the years. I mean, because through the media outlets and things, they've made it seem like Dave's a hard person to work with, but some of the best work you guys do is together.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, you know, goals are defined in bands usually toward the beginning or in the very beginning. And with Megadeth, when I met Dave, you know, he had just gotten let go from Metallica. He was certainly upset about that. And it fueled his ambitions and I think to a large degree his attention to detail in everything that we've done in Megadeth. And, you know, from the very beginning, I mean, look, he writes great songs. And in the very beginning, he was, you know, writing these songs that they didn't sound like anything else that was going on. And you know, that originality is what makes you stand out in the world. And so you know, Dave kind of by his own design, but certainly in agreement with I think all the members, it's like, you know, Dave is sort of the chief creative force of the group. But as time went on, I started to contribute a lot more. Certainly by the third record, the die had been cast of the sound and style of Megadeth, so I started to contribute to that. A lot of things I wrote on guitar, quite honestly. Easier sometimes to write some stuff on guitar than just on bass all the time. But then I got into lyric writing, and certainly by Countdown to Extinction and Euthanasia and things like that, we were very much a collaborative group. And, you know, we defer to Dave to be the quarterback, and he can call the plays and that. And, you know, but yeah, you're right. When you have creative synergy with a group, it you know, you can kind of, one person on their own can accomplish a lot, but when everybody's able to contribute to that, it just takes it up to a whole nother level. And I feel, quite honestly, that that's more where the band is at today, with Sean Drover and Chris Broderick as well. There's much more of a a team spirit and kind of a group collaboration on a lot of things that really it makes you feel like you're part of a gang together.
Yeah. Now in the book you wrote the lyrics for Foreclosure of a Dream, and that's like a very personal story for you because that happened, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, very much so. I mean, to the world at large that maybe don't know so much about it, just think of Farm Aid back in the early '80s. You know, when I grew up, you know, on a farm, and all of a sudden, you know, one day, you know, my father did quite well in farming, and he was a businessman as much as a farmer, but, you know, did really well. And then by the time in '83 when I moved out to L.A., I'd be calling back home, and my parents would be telling me about how things had really flipped around, and money was tight, and my mom had to go back to work, and, you know, all of a sudden my dad lost one or two of his farm parcels, and it was this thing that, you know, much like the housing crisis, you know, there was this bubble and it burst, and, you know, the family farm that we have has been in our family, I believe, since the late 1800s. When the Ellefson family migrated over from Norway. And, you know, so there's a deep history. Unfortunately, my brother still runs our farm, but there was a lot of transition there. And that the fabric of our country, which is the heartland, and being able to have the farming industry and produce our own crops to provide for our own country, and obviously the exports that we do, you know, that's a huge part of taking care of our own country, as well as, you know, having, you know, exporting out to help other countries as well. And when that went away in the 80s and really was diminished, I mean, that's the basis of that song, Foreclosure of a Dream, because the American way is, you know, if you dream it, you can do it. And all of a sudden, a big dream that a lot of people had, which is to be independently, you know, sustaining through the farms, that was quickly going away, and a lot of people lost everything.
You know, I totally understand that, Dave. We had a family farm implement dealership for 75 years and got ate up by the big guys, and that's one of the things that I think myself and Jerry and a lot of people who listen to this show, being very blue-collar, hardworking, and I think that's the one thing about Megadeth fans and metal fans in general, is that we can all relate to those topics.
Yeah, exactly, and you know, you're right. More and more, you know, the dream of Main Street USA. That you know, a lot of immigrants, a lot of people migrated over. My family for sure, and you know, years ago. But they, you know, that was the thing. Come to America, and you can, you know, you can be all you want to be. And now it's, you know, we see it every day on the news. Corporate greed, takeovers, the big box stores just enveloping and gobbling up all of the little people who want to have that dream of being in business for themselves. And, you know, one of the cool things about heavy metal is we get to play our music all around the world, and it speaks to a very similar demographic. You know, we've gotten to go to countries that are just emerging and developing, in a lot of third world countries, and over the years it's nice to go back and see them develop, and it does give you an appreciation as well. I mean, we've got a really special thing up here in the United States, and I think more than anything, people now are rallying together to try to preserve it, because they realize that, you know, we can't rest on our own laurels, and some of our own problems in our country are of our own doing, and there are our own mistakes. We got, you know, we got kind of fat, dumb, rich, and happy, and sat around while other people, you know, caught up with us, and it was a wake up call. And you're right, Foreclosure of a Dream applies kind of across the board as much today in 2013 as it did back in 1992 when we wrote it.
Yeah. I wanted to know, being a musician myself, you guys, Megadeth, writes very complicated compositions. Did you ever go to Dave and say, dude, how about 3 chords? Just a 3 chord song.
You know, we did. And in fact, Countdown to Extinction was the record that started to turn that corner. And I remember distinctly there was a moment where, I don't know if it was on Countdown or maybe it was a little later on Cryptic Writings or something, but we got to this point in the song, and Dave and Marty Friedman at the time were, okay, here's the obligatory solo. And of course, you know, trends had changed, and Seattle music came in, and you know, all of a sudden it was not about solos and musicianship and rock stardom. It was about, you know, kind of dumbing it down, and it, you know, the sound changed, and you know, there was this, I think even in Megadeth, we realized, okay, there's an opportunity here for us to develop more of our kind of melodic songwriting abilities that don't always have to be so complex. And we went down that road for a while, and we still do it, obviously, off the new record, Super Collider, Forget to Remember. There's a lot of songs they're pretty simple in their arrangements. But then there's other ones like Dance in the Rain, and, obviously there's a bunch of them over the years that In My Darkest Hour, Ashes in Your Mouth, these things that are quite complex. And standing on stage playing these songs again many years later, it's fun to go back and dig out those gems off the old records that have that really complex nature to their arrangement. And you can see the response from the fans, too, that as much as that style wasn't embraced by the mainstream early on, all these years later, our diehard fans really love the complexity of those early Megadeth arrangements.
Yeah. Well, we just heard Symphony of Destruction. Now, I wanted to know, do you think that song could have benefited from maybe having some cowbell?
Cowbell's never been part of the Megadeth architecture, I hate to tell you.
I know. I can't think of one song with cowbell from Megadeth.
No, I don't think we ever did. Hey, what's funny? Here's my observation. I could be wrong in this, but you heard songs that have cowbell in it, maybe even Grim, Don't Fear the Reaper and some of these songs. It's like, years back when you were making records, the cowbell was the click track. And one day I was driving down the street and I was listening to, I don't know if it was, We're an American Band by Grand Funk or Don't Fear the Reaper or something, and I heard this cowbell or something in the background, and the hippie goes, I wonder if they just turned the click track up. Went, wow, the cowbell sounds kind of good in there. And then, it's, so I don't know. To the listeners, too, give it a listen. Maybe it's worth taking a poll on that.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, Dave, your book's been out a week. Where can people get it? Is it in every bookstore, or they need to go online? Where can they pick up your book?
Yep, you should be able to pick it up everywhere. It's came out through Simon & Schuster, so it's a big publisher, so it should be available everywhere. If you do want to buy it online, there's a link called www.mylifewithdethbook.com, and you can buy it both in hardcover and through the e-reader version on that link, and have it shipped or sent directly to you.
Well, fantastic. Now, the new Megadeth album is out, and you're coming to Madison real soon. We're thinking that might be a show we might need to see up here with Fear Factory and Nonpoint. But are you going to play the tune Kingmaker?
That song has been in the set, and it's pretty ripping. It's with a new record, of course, you always want to play some of the new songs. We've changed a few of them in and out, and Kingmaker seems to be one that stays in there. And the other thing is this is the 25-year anniversary mark of So Far So Good So What. So we've started to pull a few tunes off that record into the set list this year and kind of swapping those in and out. So it's exciting to go back and revisit a lot of those songs.
Well, we look forward to seeing you out on the road, Dave, and thanks once again for coming on Rock and Metal Revival.
Absolutely. Maybe see you guys in Madison.
To catch the whole show of Rock and Metal Revival, all you have to do is check it out on these affiliates. Mega Rock Radio's on Saturdays from 11 a.m. Eastern Time, on Rock 101 KLOL on Saturdays 11 p.m. Eastern, on Z-Rock 106.9 KKZR Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and on Uncontrolled Noise Tuesdays at 1 a.m., Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and on Saturday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern on UncontrolledNoise.com. And make sure that you leave them a message and tell them that you found Rock and Metal Revival on their stations. Enjoy this edition of Rock and Metal Revival.